welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about how you can take better photos using your phone camera. Cheesy quote here, but they always say the best camera is the one that you have on you. Most of us have this on us all the time. I want to break this up into 3 different videos. Today's video is going to be on camera basics, the next video is going to be on photography basics, and the third video is going to be on editing basics. And if you can master each of those sections, your photos, man, they're going to be better. And before I dive into camera basics, I'm very passionate about this. If you want to take better photos, actually go and take photos. Go practice. If you want to, just like anything in life, if you want to get better at it, you have to go practice. You have to make a lot of mistakes until you start doing it right. So same with photography. People look at these great photographers, or you see social media and you're like, how do they do that? They're so creative. I could never do that. They are out there, they're watching YouTube videos, they're practicing, they're getting different angles. They are out there taking a lot of really bad photos and then learning to take really great photos. So keep that in mind, okay? This is meant to be interactive. Don't just follow along and be like, cool, Steph, thanks for the video. Like, actually get your phone out and do the things that I'm suggesting, okay? Now we'll get started on camera basics. First things first, I suggest turning off your flash. Usually it's on automatic, and we've all been there before. I mean, how many times we go to take a photo in a low light situation, the flash goes off and you have weird squinty eyes or these really harsh shadows. Flash just creates light that you don't want unless it's used specifically. So go ahead and go in and turn off your flash. I always have mine off, knowing that I can go in and manually turn it on if I really want to capture a photo with flash. If you have an iPhone, it's most likely going to be in the top bar when you have your camera open. Scroll over to the lightning bolt and click on it and then turn that to off. You can see on mine, I'm using a Google Pixel 2, but I go to the drop down arrow and same thing, it has the lightning bolt, and so I always have mine off. So again, you just want to avoid using flash on your phone if you can help it, which you can, which is why we're turning it off. So turn off your flash. The next thing I want you to do is go in and turn on your grid. Now you can see on mine, the grid is those 2 horizontal and vertical lines going across the screen. The grid is helpful in making sure that your horizon is straight, that your lines are straight. If you're going to take a picture of a house, I mean, we don't want it to be, you know, cockeyed or on the side. You want it to be straight, especially if you're taking landscape photos, anything outside. A telltale sign of an amateur photographer is a crooked horizon, okay? Now, this is always, photography is a stylistic choice, so if you're like, I really want to make my horizon crooked, do whatever you want. But if you do want to start taking better photos, the grid can help you just on the spot. Make sure your horizon is straight and then take the photo. You can also always make the horizon straight when you go to edit, but just like off the cuff with the grid on, it helps a lot. Also, and we'll break this down when we talk about photography tips, but it gives you a reference for the rule of thirds. So you want to put your subject where the lines cross. It's really pleasing for the eye. Again, we'll get into that, but the grid helps you have a reference for that when you're going to take your photo on your phone. If you have an iPhone, you can turn your grid on by going to settings and then finding camera and then find grid and make sure that that is turned on, and then you'll have your grid on. Again, I'll show you on mine. If I go to that drop down arrow, the settings, and then I make sure my grid is on. All right, the next feature that I want you guys to start incorporating more is timer. You don't need someone following you around all the time taking these great photos, because this is how you take photos. If you want to be in the photo and you don't have someone with you, utilize the timer. Here's an example of a photo where I didn't want to do selfie mode, but I wanted a picture of myself. So I literally set up my phone in our tomato trellis, like in our garden, and I had it on selfie mode, and I literally set the timer, pressed the shutter button, backed up, smile, you know, like, and then you can get the different poses that you want. Even this one, I wanted to take a photo of me walking away into the abyss of our lake, so I set up my phone on some sort of structure, used my grid to get my horizon straight, hit the timer button, this one for 10 seconds, and then just started walking out there. So do you see how you can utilize the timer to take some really creative and different photos? If you have an iPhone, the timer is going to be in that top bar again when you're in your camera app, just like the flash was. Up on top, it's the little like circle clock looking thing. Click on that and then choose the timer that you want. Press the shutter button and you'll have your 3 to 10 seconds. Here it is in mine. Again, if I go to that drop down arrow, it's right there. So do you see how you can utilize the timer to take some really creative and different photos? Okay, moving on to one of my favorite features, and that is burst. But unfortunately, with the latest update, my phone camera got rid of the burst capability, but if you still have it, I want you to at least know about it if you don't know how to use burst, but then also know how to utilize it, just like the timer. Burst is great to use when there is an action happening because it takes multiple images in a row. So if you have someone who's running or jumping or dancing, or you have 3 kids and you're trying to get them all smiling or eyes open or even looking at the camera, burst is a great option to use. All you do, super simple, is hold down the shutter button and it's going to take multiple photos in a row. Again, I can't show you this as a screen recording, but go ahead and just hold down the shutter and see how burst actually works. I used to use burst all the time for jumping photos. Scott's always like, when we don't know what to do, because I'm not good at posing, he's always like, just jump. And so instead of like nailing the jump, how many times does that happen? Just use burst, just hold it down. So here is an example: running, jumping, hey, and then you can pick the specific picture that you want to use, want to edit. So start using burst and you can take some really fun photos. You guys are doing so good. Stick with me because now we're moving into a little bit more advanced tools that also have to do with photography and editing. So just imagine if you can learn these, master these as camera basics, understand how to use them on your camera, and then incorporate them into some photography basics and then into editing, like your photos, man, I'm telling you, they are going to start looking awesome, okay? So next we're going to move into exposure. Exposure is how much light is reaching your camera sensor. When you take a digital photo, there's information in that. Your camera is a computer that is processing and trying to take a really great photo. And it's trying to properly expose either the highlights, the bright areas, or the shadows, the dark areas. How many times have you been enjoying a beautiful, beautiful sunset and there's another family there and they ask you to take their photo? You're like, sure. And you go and it's either properly exposing the sunset, so you get this beautiful scene, it's properly exposing the highlights, but you can't see any of the faces. Or you tap on the faces and it's properly exposing the faces so you can see people and their smiles, but it's totally blowing out the sunset. That is what exposure is. Your phone is trying to properly expose highlights or shadows. So what I want you to do is I want you to grab your phone. I want you to see this for yourself. Grab your phone, get into your camera. Point your camera at a light source, okay? Tap that light source and you're gonna see that your image changes to properly expose that light source. Now keep your phone where it is in that position and tap off the light source. Now you can see that it properly exposes wherever you tapped and that the light is totally blown out. So that's one way that you have some control over your exposure, is by tapping for what you want to properly expose. Now this gets into a little bit of focus too, which our cameras have the ability to focus on a subject and then change the exposure manually. So to show you how you can have even more control over the exposure, what I want you to do is go into your phone again, get into your camera. It's also a little different because in an iPhone you can tap and then drag anywhere, but on mine I actually have to use the slider on the right hand side. But if you have an iPhone, what I want you to do is tap to focus on a subject and then use your thumb. So you're gonna tap, let go, and then drag up or drag down and see how the light changes, how the exposure changes, how if you tap and drag up, your photo gets brighter, and if you tap and drag down, your photo gets darker. So try that out. It might be a little tricky, but once you get it, I promise you'll be able to do it all the time. Again, mine is using the slider on the right. So once you get it to the exposure that you want, you hold your finger on it and it will lock it. See the AF/AE, that's autofocus, auto exposure locked. So now you can go ahead and take that photo and it won't just adjust randomly. And that's how you have control over your exposure. Ooh, you guys are getting good. Now you know all about exposure. Now we're going to talk about HDR. HDR stands for high dynamic range. An HDR image is a composite image. So what that means is that it literally takes 3 different photos. It takes a base photo, and it takes a photo that exposes for the highlights and a photo that exposes for the shadows, and it combines the 3 into a composite that then has better detail in both the shadows and the highlights. And HDRs are great when you have extreme situations, so when you have really dark areas or really light areas. Something to know about HDR with your phone camera is that since it is taking 3 different images, your subject has to be still. So sometimes when I have my HDR on, because I always have it on and I recommend that for you too, we'll get to that, but when I go to take a photo and there's like movement, it won't even register, it won't even take the photo in HDR, especially if someone is moving, because it knows that it's gonna give me a blurry image. Instead, I have to just go in, take HDR off, and then just take a singular normal photo, and then I can go edit that later. To turn on your HDR, if you have an iPhone, you're going to go back to where you were when you turned on your grid. So go to Settings, Camera, and then find HDR and turn yours on. I'll show you where it is on mine. Again, if I just go to the drop-down arrow, you can see that I have 3 different options. I have off, on, or enhanced. I always have mine on enhanced, so that's how you turn on your HDR. We are almost done here, guys, but next up is focus. So always, 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 before you go to take a photo, tap to focus on your subject, okay? So go ahead and do this with me again. You're going to tap, and that's going to focus on the subject. If you are just taking a photo of a scene, of a landscape, and you tap to focus on your subject, most likely everything in the scene is going to be pretty sharp. It's going to be, for the most part, in focus. Where you can really manipulate and use focus in a stylistic and an artistic and a creative way is when you create a shallow depth of field. So shallow depth of field, really simply, is when you have something, an object, a subject, up close, and you tap on it and that's in focus, and then behind it is all blurry. So I want you to try this. What you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and grab a coffee mug, put it really close to the camera, and tap to focus on the coffee mug. See how when you tap to focus, the coffee mug comes into focus, is sharp, and everything else behind it is blurry, and you gotta get right up in there, okay? And also don't have it pointed down, like have it pretty straight on. So you can tap to then focus on the background, and then your foreground is going to be blurry. So by understanding depth of field, you can use your camera phone to then focus on different subjects to create a really creative and kind of fun image. Here are a few that you can see. I got up close to something and then the background was blurred, or vice versa. I get up close to something and I have the background in focus and the foreground is blurred. Again, like I said at the beginning of the video, all of these tips are meant to go out and actually try. So the next time you're taking photos of like a landscape, try to put something in the foreground, even a blade of grass or a flower. Try and focus on that and it'll just add a little something to your photos. Finally, we are on our last tip, and it's all about portrait mode. Now, the older versions of especially the iPhones don't have portrait mode. Most of the newer versions do. So if you do have portrait mode, it's going to be in the bottom part. If you just slide those different options over, you know, you have camera, video, portrait mode. So slide on over to portrait mode, and I want you to test out portrait mode for yourself. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into portrait mode, take a picture of a subject. It doesn't have to be a person either. It can be a singular subject, and then notice how it blurs out the background. So you can also use that instead of the shallow depth of field and the focus that we were talking about, you can use portrait mode to get that a similar effect. It's not gonna be quite the same, but it's going to be similar. Portrait mode really works well if there are a smaller number of subjects and a cleaner background. You did it, guys. Now you know some camera phone tips and tricks, some different things I want you to go in and test out for yourself. Just really start experimenting to get comfortable using your camera, understanding your camera and its capabilities, to then get into the photo side of it and the editing side of it. But if you can master your camera first and really know how to use it and the different capabilities of it, you're gonna be in good company. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Be sure to check out the next video all about photography tips. Again, we're going to be breaking down the basics, just some very basic things for you guys. Super simple. Oh, and if you would, be sure to subscribe, like, and share with a friend. If you think someone else would really enjoy this video and learn a lot from it, I'd appreciate if you sent it their way. It would mean so much to me. It means so much to me that you guys are here. So have yourself a wonderful day, and we will see you on the next video. Bye, guys.